The day my own son looked me in the eyes and quietly said, "Dad, we just can't afford your surgery," I believed him. The doctor had warned me not to wait much longer, but I smiled anyway and told my son my health could wait. The very next morning, I watched him walk into a realtor's office, carrying a cashier's check worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. By sunset, he had surprised his father-in-law with a beautiful beach house, completely paid in cash. Everyone celebrated while I quietly wondered when my life had become cheaper than a vacation home. If you enjoy emotional family stories with unforgettable twists and meaningful life lessons, I'd truly appreciate you subscribing to Behind Dad. And before we continue, I'd like to mention that the pictures shown throughout this video are creative visual dramatizations inspired by this story. They help tell the story, but are not real photographs from my family's life. My name is Richard Collins. I'm 73 years old, and until recently I believed my son Michael would always put family first. 3 years earlier, I had lost my wife, Helen, after 46 wonderful years together. Before she passed away, she held my hand and whispered, "Promise me you'll never stop believing in kindness." I kept that promise every single day, even when life gave me reasons not to. After Helen's funeral, Michael began visiting every weekend. He fixed broken shelves, mowed my lawn, and often told me not to worry because he would always be there for me. I believed every word. When his business struggled during the pandemic, I emptied most of my retirement savings to help him survive. I never called it a loan because parents don't keep score. Watching him rebuild his life felt more important than protecting my own savings. Last Monday, my doctor explained that I needed surgery soon. Without it, my condition could become dangerous. The estimated cost frightened me, but I still believed my family would stand beside me. That evening, I gently told Michael about the operation. He looked uncomfortable before quietly saying, "Dad, I'm so sorry. We simply can't afford it right now." His wife nodded in agreement, and I told them not to feel guilty. I even apologized for bringing it up. The next morning, my neighbor called and excitedly asked if I knew Michael had just bought his father-in-law a beautiful beach house on the coast. At first, I refused to believe it. But when I drove past the property that afternoon, I saw Michael handing over the keys while everyone hugged and celebrated. I stayed inside my truck for several minutes before driving away. My chest hurt far more than my illness ever had. 7 days later, someone knocked on my front door. Standing there was Michael's father-in-law holding a sealed envelope, his eyes filled with regret as he quietly whispered, "Richard, please read this before your son comes home." I stood at my front door for several seconds before inviting George inside. Michael's father-in-law had always treated me with respect, but that afternoon his face looked different. He carried the sealed envelope like it weighed 100 pounds. After sitting at my kitchen table, he slowly pushed it toward me and quietly said, "Richard, don't open this until I explain why I'm here." His voice trembled. I had never seen him look so ashamed. My heart told me whatever he was about to say would change everything. George took a deep breath before speaking. He admitted he believed Michael had purchased the beach house with money earned from a successful business deal. Michael proudly told everyone he wanted to thank him for years of support. George accepted the gift without asking too many questions. Then, 2 days after moving into the house, he accidentally found financial papers left inside one of the moving boxes. They weren't meant for him to see. The documents included your surgery estimate, your medical reports, and several bank statements. He immediately realized Michael had lied. The money had always been there. He simply chose to spend it somewhere else. Those words hit me harder than I expected. My surgery wasn't impossible. It had never been unaffordable. My own son had decided another person's comfort mattered more than my chance to live a healthier life. I closed my eyes and thought about Helen. She spent her entire life teaching Michael that family should always come first. I wondered what she would say if she could see us now. My disappointment was deeper than my anger. I wasn't losing hope because of my illness. I was losing faith in the son I had spent my whole life protecting. George then pointed toward the envelope. "Richard," he whispered, "I couldn't keep this secret after discovering the truth." My hands shook as I carefully opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter, copies of bank transfers, and a cashier's check made payable to the hospital for the exact amount needed for my surgery. George looked at me with tears in his eyes and quietly said, "I refuse to keep that beach house. I returned it this morning. That money belongs where it should have gone from the beginning." Before I could even thank him, another folded document slipped from the envelope. It was a signed statement describing everything Michael had admitted during a private conversation 3 nights earlier. As I finished reading it, my phone rang. The caller ID showed attorney Michael Harris. The moment I answered, he calmly said, "Richard, don't let your son know what you have. Tomorrow morning we're meeting in my office. There's something else you need to see before he arrives." I barely slept that night. George's letter stayed on my kitchen table beside Helen's old photograph. I kept reading every page, hoping I had misunderstood something. Instead, every sentence made the truth even clearer. Michael had never been trapped by money. He had simply made a choice. For the first time in my life, I questioned whether I truly knew the son I had raised. That thought hurt far more than the illness growing inside my body. The next morning, I walked into attorney Michael Harris's office carrying the envelope. George was already there. He looked exhausted, as though he hadn't slept either. Michael welcomed us into the conference room and placed another file on the table. "Richard," he said quietly, "there's more." He opened the folder and revealed emails, loan applications, and financial records collected during the beach house transaction. They showed that Michael hadn't only hidden money from me. He had also falsely claimed I refused medical treatment, so he could convince others he wasn't abandoning his father. Reading those words made my hands shake. He had protected his reputation while quietly sacrificing my health. Then Michael showed me something I never expected. Months earlier, Helen had updated her estate plan without telling anyone except attorney Harris. She had written a private letter explaining that if either of us were ever neglected for financial gain, the family trust would immediately change. She believed love should never be measured by money. Attached to her letter was a legal amendment signed, witnessed, and notarized years before her passing. Because of Michael's actions, he no longer had control over the trust he expected to inherit. Every decision would now remain protected until the court reviewed the evidence. I looked at Helen's signature and quietly whispered, "You were still protecting me." As tears filled my eyes, George admitted something that surprised everyone. The night Michael handed him the keys to the beach house, he had secretly recorded their conversation because the gift felt far too expensive. On the recording, Michael openly admitted delaying my surgery because he wanted the beach house purchased completed before my dad changed his mind about helping family. The room fell completely silent. No one needed to explain what those words meant. Attorney Harris carefully closed the file and looked directly at me. "Richard," he said, "tomorrow morning your son believes he's coming here to finalize paperwork for the family trust. He has no idea George returned the beach house. The trust has already changed, and his own words are waiting to be played in front of you. What happens next will determine whether your family falls apart forever, or finally faces the truth." The next morning I walked into attorney Michael Harris's office with a calm face, but my heart felt heavier than ever. Michael arrived a few minutes later wearing a confident smile. He believed he was there to complete paperwork for the family trust. He even shook my hand and asked how I was feeling, as if nothing had happened. I looked into my son's eyes and remembered teaching him how to ride a bicycle, helping him with homework, and staying awake through long nights whenever he was sick. I never imagined one day we'd be sitting across from each other because he had chosen a beach house over his own father's surgery. Attorney Harris quietly placed Helen's estate documents, the bank records, and George's signed statement on the table. Then he pressed one button. The recording began to play. Michael's own voice filled the room as he admitted delaying my surgery so he could finish buying the beach house first. His smile disappeared within seconds. He lowered his head and covered his face with both hands. George stood up and admitted he had already returned the beach house because he refused to keep a gift built on betrayal. The cashier's check had already been transferred directly to the hospital for my operation. Michael looked at me with tears in his eyes and whispered, "Dad, I never thought it would go this far." I quietly answered, "Neither did I." The court later confirmed Helen's trust amendment was completely valid. Michael immediately lost control over every financial decision connected to the family estate. My surgery was scheduled for the following week, and thankfully it was successful. During my recovery, I spent many evenings thinking about everything that had happened. I wasn't celebrating because my son had lost something. I was grateful because the truth had finally been stronger than the lies. George visited often, bringing homemade meals and checking on me like family should. Sometimes the people who aren't related by blood remind us what real character looks like. Months later, Michael came to my porch carrying no gifts, no excuses, and no expectations. He simply apologized. I forgave him because bitterness would only poison my own heart. But I also told him trust isn't rebuilt with words. It's rebuilt through honest choices made every single day. He quietly nodded because he finally understood. If my story touched your heart, please leave a comment and tell me what you would have done in my place. Share this story with someone who believes parents should never be treated as an afterthought. Thank you for spending this time with me on Behind Dad. And always remember this lesson. Money can buy houses beside the ocean, but it can never replace the love and sacrifice a parent deserves.